Number of sermons that will take us all the way through the Bible. Last Sunday, we talked about the first 11 chapters of Genesis. What does the word Genesis mean? Anybody? Beginning, very good. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then all the other stuff follows afterwards, right? So in Genesis, we're going to call that the era of creation. Genesis, we have, what was the crown of creation? Of all the creation that God created, what did God say? This is the very best. Man, humans. Why do we know that? Because we were created in the image of God. We were created in the image of God. And so God said, I love you so much that I am going to give you the ability to love me back or not to love me. You have that. So Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, right? And remember, there was a tree that they weren't supposed to eat of. That's called the forbidden fruit. Most of you remember that I believe that forbidden fruit is tomatoes, but we can talk about that later. Regardless, the reason when they ate of the fruit, it wasn't so much that they were eating fruit. That wasn't that bad. It was that they believed that when they ate that fruit, that they would be like God. That they would have the same kind of power that God. That's called idolatry. So that was the sin they committed. God said, well, I love you, but you can't stay in the garden anymore. So they get kicked out of the garden. They fall. And then from there, Adam and Eve, remember Adam has to sweat by his brow because of farming, and Eve will have trouble in childbirth. She'll always have pain. And remember, the snake at that point said that you'll always be at odds with human folks. From there, things just keep getting worse. More and more sin. And so there's this judgment on the earth. God saves just a family, though. Saves Noah and his family and a bunch of creation. And at the end of that, when the flood is over, God says, I'm never going to do this again. He puts a sign in the sky called a rainbow, the covenant that God makes with us. And then God says to Noah, this is important, friends. Noah, go forth and multiply. Noah is very good at multiplication, but not so good at going forth. They kind of stick around. Noah's descendants then they keep getting more and more folks. At one point they said, well, we are so great that they build a tower to themselves. God says, this is going to stop. I'm going to end this construction. He throws into them all kinds of different languages, and then finally they go forth. That's the first 11 chapters of Genesis. So now we get to chapter 12. Now, chapter 12 begins, for some people, they said this is the beginning of the history of the Bible. I disagree with that, but for some, they say, okay, now we're going to start with Abraham. Father Abraham. So Abram is over here in the land of Ur. Ur would be, if you went to modern-day Baghdad and go about halfway between Baghdad and the headwaters of the Euphrates River, that's where you're going to find Ur. Now, when Abram is over there, his family's there too, and they worship a number of different gods. And then suddenly, Abram hears God saying to him, Abram, I want you to uproot your family, and I want you to take them to the land of Canaan, a land that's flowing with milk and honey. Now, I want you to think for a moment that you are here in Minnesota, and you hear a voice from God saying, hello, I want you to go to Nebraska. You don't know anything about Nebraska. God says it's flowing with milk and honey. Do you believe God? Now, some of you have probably heard about Nebraska before, right? There's a sign for our town 100 miles away, for McDonald's 100 miles away. God, you must be crazy. But Abram says, I will follow. So he and his wife, Sarai, they go, and they take their family, and they go from Ur, the land of Ur, and they travel to the land of Canaan. Now, if you'll read the Bible carefully, you'll find that Abram doesn't always do exactly as God directs. I don't know if that's true anymore. That we as a people, when God directs us to do something, we just do it, right? But Abram had some problems with that. But finally he gets there to the land of Canaan. And God says to Abram, now remember that when they start the journey, he's 75 years old. When he gets to Canaan, we're going to place him in his 80s. And Sarah as well, she's not that much of a younger wife. And God has promised Abraham 3 things. He's promised him land, right? The land of Canaan. He's promised him progeny, children, ancestors, or people to follow after him. And he's promised Abram blessings. So here Abram and Sarah, I'm going to call them Abraham and Sarah right now. They get their names changed a bit later. But they are there in the tent, and they have a visitor. And the visitor comes and says to Abram, you and Sarah are going to have children. And Sarah, this is the time before like Viagra or Cialis or anything like that. So Abram is going, well, this sounds interesting. And Sarah's over there in the tent, and she laughs. She's just, I don't know why she's laughing. Maybe some of you can find out later on today. But regardless, she's laughing, and the angel goes, I heard you laugh. She goes, oh, no, I didn't laugh. Yes, you did. I didn't laugh. You're going to have a kid. Oh, please. It says something like that in the Bible. So 9 months later, she has a kid. His name is Isaac. Isaac means laughter. So Isaac is born. Now, if you'll know the story about Isaac and Abraham, there's one point when God says to Abraham, I want you to take Isaac, and I want you to give Isaac to me. And so they're wandering along, and Isaac goes, Dad, where's the sacrifice that we're supposed to give God? And Abraham wisely says, God will provide the sacrifice when we get there. They go up the mountain. And some of you know the story. They go up to the mountain, and Abraham is just about ready to give Isaac to God. And God stops Abraham's hand. He says, stop. Unbind your son. And over there in the thicket, there is a ram that's caught. Take him instead and put him on the altar. Now, I want you to think about a lamb being sacrificed on behalf of the people. You'll hear about that later on. Some of you already have an inkling, right? Please say yes. Whew. All right. So they go back down the mountain, and Isaac grows up. He gets married to Rebekah, and they have a pair of twins. The first twin who comes out, his name is Esau. Esau just means really hairy. And so we're going to call him Harry. So Harry is coming, but right on his ankle, right on his heel, the twin is hanging on like, I want to get out first. Esau, get out of my way. His name is Jacob. Jacob, that name means trickster, by the way. Heel grabber, whatever you want to call it. But Jacob is right on Esau's heel. And forever, these two are always at odds. Esau is the one who likes to go out and hunt. He likes to fish. He likes to wild game stuff. And Jacob tends to stay at home. He's more into computer games and television and those kinds of things. So Esau, one day, he comes in from hunting. He's starving. He's just famished. And he says, I just got to eat something. And Jacob goes, well, look what I found on the cooking channel. Would you like some? Esau says, yeah, I'd love it. And Jacob says, I can only give you some if you promise that you give me your inheritance. And Esau says, well, I don't care, whatever. Just it smells really good. Just let me eat. And so when Esau eats that, he makes a promise to give Jacob his inheritance. Now, the oldest son would always get the inheritance. And Jacob has already tricked his brother. A little bit older, Isaac is losing his eyesight. Dad is losing his eyesight. And he says, before I go and meet my maker, I want to give my blessing to Esau. So he calls Esau in his room. He said, Esau, before I give you my blessing, would you just go out, hunt up something wonderful? You make the best food. Would you go hunt up something, some wild game, and come back? When you bring it back to me, I will give you my blessing. Now, so that's Esau leaves. Harry goes out, and he goes hunting. And Rebecca is there, and she's listening, and she calls Jacob, the other son, the youngest son. She says, Jacob, your dad just sent out your brother to go hunting, and he intends to give him the blessing. I want you to dress up like Esau. And Jacob goes, ooh, ick. And she said, well, we've been watching the television together. There's this wonderful show what not to wear, right? So we're going to get you this hairy outfit. We're going to put that on you. We're going to make you smell like Esau. You're going to go in there, give him some stuff, and he's going to believe that you're Esau, and he'll give you the blessing. So Jacob does just exactly that. He does what his mom says him to do, and he goes in there. Isaac is a little suspicious, but he can't see you, remember. He can, well, you smell like my son. Okay, I'm going to give you the blessing. So he gives Jacob the blessing. Esau comes in with the big hunt, and Isaac goes, well, wait, I just gave my blessing to you. I've been tricked again, Esau says. Now, Rebecca goes, your brother's awfully mad. So Jacob, you need to go stay with Uncle Laban for a while. I'll try to calm things down. You go stay with Uncle Laban. So Jacob goes, he stays with Uncle Laban, and when he gets to Uncle Laban's house, he finds a beautiful girl. Oh, she's ravishing. He wants to marry her. Uncle Laban is kind of a trickster. I think he gets back at Jacob right there. He says, you know what, Jake? If you work for me for, let's say, like 7 years, I'll let you have my daughter Rachel's hand in marriage. Well, actually, he didn't say Rachel. He said, I'll let you have my daughter's hand in marriage. So Jacob does that, works, and down the aisle. Back then, the veil was really there, so the veil's there, and down the aisle, here comes his bride, and he lifts the veil, and instead of Rachel, it's her older sister, Leah. And he looks at, I don't want Leah. And Uncle Laban says, well, you got to marry Leah. She's the first one. Oh, man, I want Rachel. He goes, well, you marry Leah first. You work for me another 7 years, and I'll let you marry Rachel. So he does that. They get married. And by the way, they're having kids. Jake and Leah have some kids. Jake, I don't know if he had the Cialis stuff or not. I'm not sure. It's not in the Bible. But anyway, they have a lot of kids. They have 12 boys. 12. But Jacob loves one above all the rest. A son he had with Rachel, and a son that many of you already know because you saw Joseph in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. His name is Joseph. Now, Joseph, he's kind of it says that he's very handsome. We know that Jacob loves him most because above all the other kids, Jacob says, okay, I'm going to give you this wonderful coat. You can have this coat. And Joseph has these dreams, and he interprets the dreams. And some of those dreams are like, he tells his brothers, I had a dream where there are a bunch of sheaves of wheat, and they all bow to me. And there just happens to be 12 all bowing to me. So not only his brothers, but his dad is bowing down to him. Now, this ticks off his brothers. So they say, we're going to get rid of him. I am sick and tired of hearing how much Dad loves Joseph. Let's just get rid of him. We're going to take him out in the desert, put him into a cistern, and he can die right there. So he's out, they take him out there, and they put him into a cistern, and then there's a bunch of Ishmaelites who are traveling through, and they said, well, why should we just let him drown? Let's sell him. I mean, we can make some money off of him. So they sell him to the Ishmaelites into slavery, and the Ishmaelites take him all the way into the land of Egypt. The brothers go back to Jacob. They said, sorry, Dad. Joseph is dead. Here's his coat. they dipped it in goat's blood. He is really gone. Jacob is extremely sad. Now, meanwhile, back in Egypt, the Ishmaelites get rid of Joseph. They sell him to a person who is of high stature named Potiphar. Potiphar has a wife, and Potiphar's wife thinks Joseph is very hot. Get it? Hot. And so, like the Bieber, right? So, we don't know how old Potiphar's wife is, but she thinks Joseph is pretty hot, and Joseph is one of the many servants for Potiphar, and she tries to get Joseph to come and lie with her. Joseph says, I can't, no, that's inappropriate. I wouldn't do such a thing. And so she says, well, okay, if you don't do it, I'm just going to say that you did it, and then you're going to get in a lot of trouble, so you might as well do it. And he says, no, I won't. And so she says, he raped me. And from there, Joseph gets thrown in the slammer. Now, while Joseph is, now do you find this odd? Here is the chosen son. First he gets sold into slavery, and now he's in the slammer. He's done everything that he's supposed to do. The king of all of Egypt. He had a couple of servants who weren't serving him well, and so he throws them into the slammer as well. And both of them have had dreams. And Joseph says, well, I can't interpret your dreams, but I know someone who can. Let's pray to my God, and my God will be able to tell you what your dreams meant. Well, it just so happened that one of the servants had this dream that they were going to be able to live. That's what Joseph interprets for him. And so Joseph just says, hey, when you get back to your king, will you just let him know that I'm here in the prison? That I would really like to get out? And the servant says, oh, sure, I'll do that. More than a year passes before Pharaoh has a dream. And he is up day and night trying to figure it out. There's this thing about fat cows and skinny cows. Now, I know about skinny cows. That's some kind of dessert that you find in the frozen section, right? Fat cows, and he's just fretting. He's going, what is this stuff? And so that servant who had been helped by Joseph before said, hey, I know this dude. He's probably still in prison. So Pharaoh summons Joseph. Joseph comes. Joseph is able to tell Pharaoh what his dream is about, that there's going to be a time of plenty, and there's going to be a time of famine, and you should get your ducks in a row, or your cattle, or whatever that means. So Pharaoh puts Joseph in charge. He is second in command. Meanwhile, back in Israel, the famine is going on. Jacob and his family are going, well, I heard there's food over in Egypt. So he sends some of the brothers over to Egypt. They go in front of Joseph. Joseph has a little fun with them. But eventually what happens is that Jacob and his family, and God changes Jacob's names to Israel. They come over to the land of Egypt. Now, I want you to be careful about this land of Egypt. Remember where we are? We're in the land of Egypt, and Egypt is becoming the safe sanctuary. I want you to think forward for a moment. Let's go to the time of Jesus when he's just a little kid. Remember a little kid? And Herod from Israel is saying, I'm going to kill all the little kids around this area. And where does Joseph, Jesus' dad, take Jesus? To Egypt. So here we are. Joseph has called Jacob to his side, and to all his brothers, he even forgives all his brothers, and they are in the land of Egypt. We are at the close of Genesis. So we've gone through all of Genesis in less than 10 minutes. Pretty good. So what is about the patriarchs? Well, let's start with the first patriarch. His name was Abraham, right? The first patriarch is Abraham. He has a son. His name is Isaac. He has a son. His name is? And he has 12 sons, and the favorite is? Wonderful. I'm going to try it again, try to get everybody in this together. So, our first patriarch, his name is who? Abraham. Stovetop pipe, the hat, right? Abraham. His son is? Isaac. Laughter. And then Isaac has a pair of twins, but the one who we hold on to is who? Jacob. Jacob the trickster. Jacob has 12 sons, but the one who is the favorite is Joseph. Now, we started out here in the land of Ur, and then we moved to the land of Canaan. And God said to Abraham, Abraham, I am going to promise you this. I am going to give you land, I am going to give you progeny, children, and I am going to give you blessings. Now, Abram goes to the land of Canaan, right? But we know that as the place called Israel today. So here's my question for you. How many of you have heard about the Hivites being in the news lately? Anybody? The Pezerites, the Assyrians. Not us. We've heard about Syrians, but not Assyrians, right? How about the Persians? Now, we know folks that was formerly Persia, but we don't call them Persians anymore, right? How many of you heard about Israel in the news within the past 60 days? Oh, let me see. Have you heard about Israel at all in the past 60 days? 90 days? A year? Do you know how big Israel is? It's about the size of New Hampshire. Now, you haven't heard about Pezerites, Hivites. Those have all gone away. But Israel is still there. God keeps his promises. The Jewish folks will begin their understanding of their history with Abraham. Father Abraham. And God keeps his promises in all kinds of ways. If you keep reading, especially the Old Testament, you are going to find that God's people often screw up. Now, it doesn't happen anymore, but God's people often screw up. But God says, I'm going to keep my promise. We still hear about Israel. And I can tell you, friends, that God continues his promises through Abraham, because through Abraham we come all the way to Jesus. And Jesus not only gives us that promises that Abraham had, but he says, this is what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you forgiveness of sin, and I am going to give you life everlasting. Those are the promises of Jesus. God always keeps his promises. Now, his promise doesn't say that you're not going to show up in the prison every once in a while. His promise doesn't say that your brothers may decide that they don't like you anymore. His promise doesn't even say that there are times when you are going to be scared out of your wits. His promise is, I will always be with you. I love you. That is the promise of the patriarchs. And God's people said, Amen. Let's sing about that.